Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel retired Alan West here, Senior Fellow at the Media Research Center. There was a lot of news that came in over the weekend, and I want to touch on a couple of those points because I think that they're very important. It also shows a little bit of the bias that the mainstream media has. First of all, we had the announcement from North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, that he was going to be suspending any further nuclear testing and intercontinental ballistic missile launching and testing as well. Now, there was a lot of people that said that this was a huge breakthrough, and let's be very honest. This is an incredible change from the strategic patience foreign policy in regard to Barack Obama and North Korea. But we can also go back through the George W. Bush administration, also Bill Clinton's administration, and see that we have had 24 years of foreign policy failures with North Korea. So for the first time, we have a different attitude and a different tone coming out of North Korea. And of course, the mainstream media initially said that President Trump was leading us toward a nuclear war because he stood and showed resolve and resilience and didn't cower to the rantings and the ravings of the little madman from North Korea. But now we have to be very circumspect, very concerned, and we have to be extremely cautious. Because no sooner than North Korea had come out and said that they were going to suspend their nuclear testing and suspend their ICBM launching, which really does not equal nuclear disarmament. That's a completely different thing. North Korea's Kim Jong-un then demanded that the United States withdraw 28,000 troops from South Korea. Now, in about 4 days, you're going to have a summit between the leaders of North Korea and South Korea, President Moon. And without a doubt, President Moon, who wants to have probably takes a more conciliatory tone, he would probably look at this offer and maybe he would be a little bit more, accepting of it. But one of the key things is South Korea cannot put the United States of America in a very bad position so that now we have to sit back and say the South Koreans have agreed to something and then we look as though we are not agreeing and we're causing more turmoil. So hopefully there are a lot of good communications between our Trump administration and the South Korean presidential administration. But the most important thing is before there's any summit with North Korea, we need to make sure that we have that high ground and we demand and we stay on that high ground. You know, before there's a summit, we need to know who was the murderer of Otto Warmbier, the young University of Virginia student who was tortured and murdered and sent back to us in a state of a coma, which he ensuingly died. We also need to have a release of the 3 Americans that are being held illegally by the North Koreans. I think also, when you think about the summit that was just held with Japanese President Shinzo Abe, we need to get the Japanese detainees released from North Korea. That should be a precondition before we even sit down to the summit. Now, when we go into that summit between Kim Jong-un and President Trump, it's very important that there are no photo ops because the last thing needs to be seen, and certainly the mainstream media will capitalize on it, is any seemingly friendship relationships or whatever with Kim Jong-un. There should be no handshakes. There should be no exchanges of gratitudes or anything or platitudes. This should be a meeting where President Trump walks in, takes his seat, and starts talking about what has to happen. The number one thing that has to happen is nuclear disarmament of North Korea, and that has to be verified by a U.S.-led inspection team along with the Japanese and the South Koreans. The other thing we have to be very concerned of is what does China seek to get out of it? I will tell you that the demand for the 28,000 troops to leave South Korea, American troops to leave, that's probably something that China is backing because they want to continue to have their regional hegemonic expansion into the South China Sea, the Scarborough Shoals, which affects the Philippines, all across the Pacific Rim. So we should take a hardline stance on this. We should not give anything to North Korea. Everything that we demand, North Korea must accept, or else we should just increase sanctions. As a matter of fact, we should have a new list of sanctions that will go forward if North Korea within 48 hours does not meet the demands that we make in this first summit meeting. Will there be a second summit meeting? I'm quite sure there has to be. Does it have to be between President Trump and Kim Jong-un? I don't think it has to be. I think the most important thing is that we lay down that marker of the things that we expect. And most importantly, Kim Jong-un wants to survive. And the second thing is that China wants to continue to have that troublesome little kid that we continue to focus on while we don't focus on what China is doing. And I think also a key part of this is that we continue to stand up for the fairness in economic trade policy with China, because China is really the major patron and benefactor of North Korea. So a lot more to see, but it's very interesting that all of a sudden just the same as the mainstream media was praising Kim Jong-un's sister at the Winter Olympics, and she's their minister of propaganda. They were also praising Kim Jong-un as some foreign policy specialist. But most importantly, President Trump needs to understand this is about the art of war, not so much the art of the deal. The second thing that happened over the weekend, all of a sudden we have these Hollywood elitists that have decided that they're going to stand up and take down the National Rifle Association. Now, in full disclosure, I am a Patriot Life member, I'm a Golden Eagle, and also a member of the Ring of Freedom and a board member of the National Rifle Association, founded in 1871. It is the nation's oldest civil rights organization. So ask yourself, why would these Hollywood elites want to take down an organization that, well, you know, back in the time when the Democrats were allowing people to run around in white robes and hoods, it was the National Rifle Association that stood up for the Second Amendment rights for recently freed slaves, people like me. Back in the early 2000s, when there was a black man, a veteran of our armed services by the name of Otis McDonald, who just wanted to be able to have a firearm to be able to protect themselves from the gangs in Chicago. It was the NRA, the National Rifle Association, that stood with Otis McDonald. And today, when you look at all of these mass shootings and things that are happening and understand what happened at the Waffle House, once again, we see that law enforcement had this individual under their wraps. And I think the most important thing we need to look at with this Waffle House shooting, why did the father give back these firearms to this young man that was mentally disturbed? The National Rifle Association has nothing to do with mass shootings. No member of the NRA has anything to do with mass shootings. But one thing that is so important to understand is that the Hollywood elites, the progressive socialist left, they would prefer to see us disarmed. And how interesting, because just last week, April the 19th, 1775, 243 years ago, it were those men and women who stood there, those men especially who stood there at Lexington Green and Concord Bridge to make sure that the British did not disarm us and destroy a weapons factory, an armaments factory in Concord, Massachusetts. And look how far we've come. So I think it's so important that the media is not telling the whole story. I've never seen the media come out and say anything about Planned Parenthood and the amount of young people, unborn children that they kill daily. To include, since Roe v. Wade 1973, some 17 to 19 million black babies. So as we go forward, North Korea is going to be a big issue. And then also, the National Rifle Association will be having its 147th annual meeting right here in my hometown of Dallas, Texas. I welcome all of these detractors, and I would think that maybe we could have a debate on this issue about gun control, because gun control has never been an issue that has benefited the black community since Reconstruction. And it continues to not have good situations for the black community when you look at the murder rate in Chicago and some of these other inner cities. So why is it that these elites will oftentimes have their own armed security? Let's think about it. How many people were guarding the Academy Awards? What is good for them? We should be able to defend ourselves as well. And the important thing is that the Media Research Center is always standing on as watchmen on the walls to make sure that reporting is done fair, balanced, and accurate.